This video is for Calc class, and it's for the day for when you're going to be proving the trig derivatives. So we already know the derivative of sine, and we know the derivative of cosine, and you got the derivative of the other four trigonometric functions by looking in your book. We're actually going to prove those other four derivatives today, and you're going to do that through making an anchor chart. Before we get started, just take a second to open your agenda and note that for tonight's homework, it's found on page 25 of your note packet, and tonight's homework is differentiation quiz number 3, which I think you'll be able to start before the end of the class today. So with your group, go ahead and get with your pod, and remember your former secretary from the last activity. They assigned a new secretary to come and get the supplies. And the supplies should be up at the front of the room with the sub. And the supplies are going to be an assignment of one of the 4 trig functions. And then it's some anchor chart material and the pens and markers. And so the person's going to go with the anchor chart activity. And when you unroll the anchor chart, the first thing you're going to notice is that it's like the size of a half of a sheet, because I'm going to call these mini anchor charts. We're going to tape 2 together to make a full-size anchor chart. So I want you to work the tall way. Do not work the wide way. Work the tall way so that we can tape them together and make a full-size anchor chart. And so these are the 4 trig functions we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on tangent, which we know is sine over cosine, cotangent, which we know is the reciprocal of that cosine over sine, secant, which is 1 over cosine, and cosecant, which is 1 over sine. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have one of these 4 for your group to prove for differentiation. And so in order to differentiate the tangent of x, what we're really going to do is we're going to differentiate sine over cosine. Or in order to differentiate cotangent, you're going to differentiate cosine over sine, and so on. If you've got secant, you're going to differentiate 1 over cosine. If you have a cosecant, you're going to differentiate 1 over sine. And the way you're going to differentiate these ratios or these fractions is by using the quotient rule. So you're gonna stick with the fractional or the ratio definitions of these last 4 trig functions, and you're gonna go ahead and apply this quotient rule where you do low times the derivative of high minus high times derivative of low, all over low squared, right? Low d high minus high d low, and you're gonna do that on one of these 4 fractions to create your anchor chart. And then what you want to do is after you do the quotient rule, you want to simplify it so that the last line of your anchor chart is that the derivative is looking like what is in your book, so what you've already written down in your notes. So that's the goal of the anchor chart. So at this point, you can go ahead and work on the anchor chart, and when you're done with the anchor chart, you can continue this video and see what your next activity is. This anchor chart activity should take maybe 15 minutes tops. So you can go ahead and stop the video at this time. Okay, so since you're tuning back into the video, I'm assuming that you've completed your anchor chart activity. The next activity is to return that anchor chart complete and the supplies to the sub. And now your secretary is gonna, as they're dropping that off, they're gonna pick up 3 of these foldables. So these foldables will look like a flat sheet of paper, a single flat sheet of paper. And you're gonna go ahead and fold the flaps in. And it's going to be a quick reference guide for the 6 trigonometric functions, so that you don't have to flip through your notes all the time. And then it's going to have 6 examples for you to work. So this activity should take maybe 20 minutes to complete if you stay focused. And just a quick note, as you're working through the 6 examples, the sub does have a key, so you can check your answers with the sub. Or if you feel super confident, you can check your answers with another group. So here's the inside of the foldable. So this right flap and this left flap would fold over on top of these. So on the flaps, you have your 6 trigonometric functions, and you can go ahead and you don't have to write down all the steps, but just go ahead and write down what the derivative of the sine is and what the derivative of the cosine is, and so on and so forth. And then we have these 6 examples for you to work out with your group. So if you notice, example 1 is an example of the product rule, right? We have x squared sine x, so we have to differentiate that using the product rule. And likewise, example 6, x to the 5th cotangent x, so we'll have to differentiate that using the product rule. And then just kind of scanning the remaining ones, these 2 are going to need the quotient rule, number 2 and number 4. You see we have that classic ratio set up there, so we're going to have to do the quotient rule on those 2. And then 5 and 3, those are just regular differentiation. No special rules required there. Like for instance, number 3, we're going to take 4 times the derivative of the tangent. And of course, we know the derivative of the tangent is the secant squared. And then minus the derivative of x to the half power. So this derivative is going to look like 4 secant squared x minus 1/2 x to the minus 1/2. And then, of course, rewriting this so that it's back in radical form and back in the denominator, since we have that negative power after we differentiate it. So go ahead and get started on these examples and complete your foldable. When we get back into the classroom, you can hole punch that so that it can go into your binder. Like I said, this activity should take about 20 minutes. So by the time we're done with these 2 activities, you're about 35 minutes into the class, which allows you 25 minutes now to go ahead and do quiz 3. It's 8 questions. Here's the grading scale right here for quiz 3. I'm going to dub this a no calculator allowed. Okay, I don't want you to use Math 8 to find your derivatives. I want you to differentiate by hand, because that's how you're really going to find these questions on the unit exam. So you should be able to get done with this in all likelihood, and then of course working on any con that you might not have completed yet in preparation for next week's test. If you have any questions, or you just are not your group and it hasn't been able to get some right answers, don't hesitate to check with other groups to see what they're getting. And if you still can't, after doing that, if you still can't figure it out, you can always email me. I should be available to answer emails periodically during the day, so that you can get your questions answered.